The train rolled into the station just before midnight, its metal wheels screeching against the rails as cold air swept across the platform. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting long, uneven shadows that stretched toward track 9. Among the scattered passengers stood 5 college girls, bundled in hoodies and denim jackets, clutching backpacks stuffed with textbooks and half-finished assignments. They looked tired but excited, the kind of excitement that only comes when the weekend is close and the road ahead feels wide open. A station clock ticked loudly overhead, marking 11:47 p.m., as the conductor called out boarding. They boarded together, laughing as they squeezed down the narrow aisle of car B, searching for seats that faced the window. One of them joked about hating night trains, another pressed her forehead against the glass, watching the platform slide by. A nearby passenger later recalled how noticeable they were, 5 voices cutting through the low hum of the engine, 5 silhouettes reflected in the dark window. As the train pulled away, the station disappeared, leaving only the endless stretch of tracks glowing faintly under the moon. Inside the car, the atmosphere shifted. The lights dimmed slightly, and the chatter softened as the train picked up speed. The girls shared snacks, passed around a small cassette recorder, and talked about a presentation due Monday morning. Every so often, the train lurched, causing the windows to rattle and the overhead luggage racks to creak. Outside, nothing but darkness rushed past, broken only by the occasional signal light blinking red, then gone. Just after midnight, the train began to slow. An automated voice crackled over the speakers, announcing a brief stop ahead, track 9. None of the girls stood up. None reached for their bags. Yet witnesses later claimed the air inside the car felt heavy, like the pressure before a storm. One passenger noticed the girls had gone quiet, all 5 of them staring toward the same window as the train crept alongside an unlit platform. As the train came to a halt, the platform lights failed to turn on. The doors remained closed, but the sound of movement echoed outside. Footsteps on gravel, metal scraping softly against metal. For nearly a minute, no one inside car B spoke. The conductor never stepped out. Then, without warning, the train lurched forward again, pulling away from track 9, leaving behind a platform that wasn't listed on any public schedule and 5 girls who would never be seen riding that train again. When the train finally pulled into the Ohio station just after 3 a.m., most passengers were half asleep, groggy from hours of rocking motion and dim lights. As people stood and gathered their bags, a conductor walked down car B, checking seats one last time. That's when he noticed something strange. The row where the 5 college girls had been sitting was completely empty. No backpacks under the seats. No jackets draped over the armrests. It looked as if no one had occupied those seats at all. Assuming they had stepped off at an earlier stop, the conductor reached the compartment door beside their seating area, only to find it closed. When he tried the handle, it wouldn't budge. The door was locked. Not jammed. Not damaged. Fully locked from the inside, the way it could only be secured by someone already in the compartment. A maintenance worker was called, and when the door was finally forced open, the small space inside was empty, cold, and unnaturally still. Railway staff searched the car in growing confusion. There were no signs of panic, no torn fabric, no broken glass, no blood. Even more disturbing, the emergency exit window inside the compartment showed no fingerprints at all. It was as if no one had touched it. One officer later described the air inside the space as wrong, heavier than the rest of the train, carrying a faint metallic smell that didn't belong. Security footage was pulled from the cameras installed in car B. The video showed the girls sitting together, laughing, passing the cassette recorder between them. Then, as the train slowed near track 9, the feed glitched. Static filled the screen. The timestamp skipped forward exactly 11 minutes. When the picture returned, the seats were empty, and the compartment door was already locked. No one was seen entering. No one was seen leaving. Ticket records only deepened the mystery. 5 tickets had been scanned when the girls boarded. Yet only 4 exit scans appeared at the final station. 1 ticket simply vanished from the system, as if it had never existed. By sunrise, police cordoned off car B, but among officers and railway workers, a quiet question spread. How do 5 people disappear from a moving train, without opening a single door? By the time the sun rose, the disappearance of the 5 college girls had already become a multi-agency investigation. Local police, transit authorities, and state troopers swarmed the rail yard, stretching yellow tape along track 9 and shutting down service for hours. Officers walked the length of the platform, scanning gravel and steel for any sign of disturbance. There were no footprints leading away from the track, no drag marks, No discarded belongings, just untouched stones and silent rails that seemed to absorb every sound. Search teams moved outward in widening circles. K9 units were brought in, their handlers watching closely as the dogs followed the girl's scent from car B to the edge of track 9. Then, without warning, every dog stopped. Some refused to move forward. Others whined and backed away, tails low, noses still pointed at the same spot along the rail. Handlers later admitted they had never seen trained dogs react like that before. Not to fire, not to chemicals, not to death. Investigators began questioning railway employees, digging into old maintenance logs and forgotten records. That's when inconsistencies started surfacing. Several veteran workers mentioned a platform that used to be there years ago, a service stop that didn't appear on current maps. Younger employees had never heard of it. When detectives requested blueprints, entire sections near track 9 were missing, pages torn out, diagrams replaced with vague labels like restricted access. Meanwhile, the girls' families arrived, demanding answers. Candlelight vigils formed along the fence line as news cameras rolled day and night. Tips flooded in, claims of sightings, phone calls that cut off mid-sentence, reports of screams heard near the tracks after midnight. None of it led anywhere. Credit cards went untouched. Phones never pinged another tower. It was as if the 5 girls had slipped out of the world entirely. Months passed. Leads dried up. Funding was redirected. The case files grew thicker but emptier at the same time, filled with unanswered questions and redacted pages. By the end of the first year, the investigation was officially marked inactive. But among the officers who had worked track 9, there was an unspoken agreement. Something had happened there that night, something the reports couldn't explain, and something they were quietly told to stop looking for. In the years after the case went cold, the official silence around track 9 grew thicker, but among railway workers, the stories never stopped. Engineers who worked overnight routes began mentioning strange disruptions. Radios crackling with static only when passing that section of track, signals blinking out for a few seconds before returning to normal. Supervisors dismissed it as old equipment, but the reports all pointed to the same location, the same stretch of rail where 5 girls had vanished. Some workers claimed they heard voices while slowing near the track late at night. Not shouting, not screaming. Soft, overlapping whispers that seemed to drift along the rails, slipping through open cab windows. A conductor once reported hearing a woman laugh briefly, followed by the sound of knocking, 3 slow taps coming from beneath the train. When he stopped to investigate, there was nothing there except cold steel and darkness. Maintenance crews tasked with inspections avoided track 9 whenever possible. One veteran technician admitted he refused to work that area after finding handprints on the side of a railcar, prints that looked smeared, as if someone had been pressing outward from inside the metal. Another worker described seeing 5 shadows standing just beyond the platform edge, their shapes tall and unmoving, vanishing the moment the headlights swept across them. Logs from night shifts began showing unusual behavior. Trains stalled for no mechanical reason. Clocks in the control room ran slow during certain hours, always between 12 o'clock and 12:15 a.m. One dispatcher noted in a private journal that every time a train passed track 9 during that window, the cabin temperature dropped sharply, fogging the windows even in summer. By the early 2000s, resignations quietly increased. Some employees transferred routes. Others quit without explanation. Those who stayed learned not to talk about track 9 during daylight hours. But after midnight, when the rails hummed and the air turned still, even the most seasoned engineers admitted they felt watched, as if something beside the track was waiting, listening for the sound of an approaching train. More than 20 years after the girls vanished, the case might have stayed buried if not for a single man cleaning out his garage. The retired transit officer had spent decades with the rail authority, the kind of career that ended quietly, without ceremony. While sorting through old boxes of manuals and paperwork, he found a thin, dust-covered folder with no title, just a faded stamp that read internal use only. Inside were reports dated 1998, all referencing track 9. The documents described a structural incident that had never been reported to the public. According to the file, a routine inspection revealed abnormal readings beneath the track, hollow spaces where solid ground should have been. Further investigation uncovered an underground service tunnel running parallel to the rails, a tunnel missing from every official blueprint. Engineers noted that the passage showed signs of age far beyond the rest of the rail system, as if it had been there long before modern construction. One report detailed an emergency closure order issued weeks after the girls disappeared. Track 9 was to be sealed until further notice, citing safety concerns. But the language in the memo felt deliberately vague. No dates. No signatures. Just a directive to reroute trains and restrict access during late-night hours. A handwritten note in the margin read, "Do not log night activity." The most unsettling pages came near the back of the file. An inventory list labeled recovered items included 5 train passes, personal notebooks, a hair tie, and a cassette recorder, all marked as found beneath the track. There were no photos of the recovery, no chain of custody forms, and no explanation of how or when the items were retrieved. The final line read simply, "No human remains located." When the retired officer shared the file with an investigative journalist in 2020, the story spread quickly before officials could respond. Within days, rail authorities denied the tunnel's existence, claiming the documents were outdated or misinterpreted. But the folder disappeared shortly after, taken during what was described as a routine records review. The journalist noted one last detail before the file was gone. The last maintenance entry for Track 9 had been timestamped at 12:07 a.m., the same minute the train cameras had gone dark in 1997. After the leaked documents reignited public pressure, authorities quietly approved a limited inspection beneath Track 9. The operation was kept off the books, scheduled for just before dawn when rail traffic was at its lowest. Workers removed a section of gravel and steel, revealing a narrow access hatch sealed with bolts that showed decades of rust. When the hatch finally gave way, a cold rush of air rose from below, carrying a damp, metallic smell that no one on the crew could explain. The tunnel beneath the track was smaller than expected, barely tall enough to stand in. Its concrete walls were cracked and stained, marked with numbers and symbols that didn't match modern railway codes. Flashlights swept across the floor, revealing footprints layered over one another, some sharp and recent, others worn smooth as if they'd been walked over again and again. The deeper the team moved, the quieter it became, until even the sound of breathing felt out of place. At the center of the passage, they found a recessed chamber carved into the rock. Inside, arranged near the wall, were personal items coated in dust but strangely intact, 5 rusted train passes, notebooks swollen from moisture, and a small cassette recorder tangled in its own ribbon. Each object was catalogued in silence. No one spoke. No one needed to ask why the items matched the girls who vanished in 1997. Against protocol, one investigator pressed play on the cassette recorder. Static hissed at first, then faint voices emerged, young, nervous, overlapping. The girls were talking about the train slowing down, about the lights outside not working, about feeling like they were being watched. Then the recording captured a deep, mechanical rumble, louder than any train engine on record, followed by a long pause filled with whispering that didn't sound like any of the 5 voices. The inspection ended abruptly. The chamber was photographed, then sealed without explanation. Crew members were instructed not to discuss what they had seen, and all equipment logs from that morning were classified. But one technician later admitted that as they climbed back toward the surface, he felt vibrations beneath his boots, steady, rhythmic, like rails humming far below the ground, as if another train was passing through a tunnel that wasn't supposed to exist. After the discovery of the hidden chamber beneath Track 9, authorities moved quickly to seal the area permanently. Official statements labeled it an industrial anomaly, and the public was told the site was unsafe for inspection. Yet, railway employees who had worked near the track quietly whispered about a pattern. Every 23 years, without fail, trains were rerouted away from Track 9 for a single night. No public notice. No maintenance explanation. Nothing in the schedules. And every time it happened, the old legends surrounding that stretch of track seemed to stir among the crews. Local residents claimed they could hear strange sounds on the nights surrounding the rerouted trains. Some reported a low, continuous hum that seemed to rise from the earth itself, punctuated by faint metallic knocks. Others said they saw lights flicker along the platform, yellowish glows that appeared and vanished, revealing shapes that were never there when approached. The sightings were brief, fleeting, and often dismissed as fatigue or imagination, but the consistency over decades was impossible to ignore. Engineers and conductors who dared to pass near Track 9 during those anomalous nights reported eerie incidents. Radios would sputter and go silent. Instrument panels flickered. Cab lights dimmed in patterns that mimicked human breathing. Several crew members swore they saw shadowy figures standing on the platform, their forms tall and elongated, watching the trains pass. Every attempt to verify these reports ended in frustration. Cameras failed, tape corrupted, and official logs showed no anomalies. Even more unsettling, some maintenance workers noticed that objects near Track 9 seemed to move on their own. Tools left on the tracks or in the inspection tunnels were sometimes found hundreds of feet away, arranged neatly, as if someone, or something, was waiting for the next train to arrive. A few veterans claimed they felt invisible eyes on them, following each step, feeling a pressure that grew heavier the closer they got to the sealed tunnel. Night after night, the air around Track 9 remained colder than the surrounding area, fogging breath in the middle of summer. Whispers from the railway community told of a haunting rhythm tied to the vanished girls. Some theorized that Track 9 itself remembered the events of 1997, that the platform and tunnel were cursed or alive in some way. Engineers, dispatchers, and even retired staff said the track seemed to anticipate trains, bending perception and time around it, as if waiting for the next victims or witnesses. Every so often, someone would vanish near that stretch of rail, though officially unrelated, and every disappearance was quietly absorbed into the legends that grew heavier with each passing year. And so, Track 9 remains sealed, hidden beneath layers of rusted metal and years of forgotten tunnels. No one knows exactly what happened to the 5 college girls that night in 1997, or why their belongings reappeared 2 decades later, perfectly preserved, in a chamber that should not exist. Some say the track itself remembers. Some say it waits. Trains still run past that stretch of rail, but only under the careful eyes of engineers who dare not linger too long. And on nights when the wind is still and the air grows inexplicably cold, those who work the lines swear they hear faint whispers, voices of laughter, of warning, of despair, echoing from a platform that has no place on any map. The folders and files that once told the story of Track 9 are gone, and the tunnel beneath the rails is sealed tight. But the record of the vanished girls, and the inexplicable, unearthly events that surround their disappearance, has etched itself into the memory of every person who has ever worked near the tracks. So if you ever find yourself riding a late-night train past an abandoned platform, keep your eyes open. Because some secrets don't stay buried. They wait, they watch, and every so often, they call for someone new.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.